Have you ever wondered what They Might Be Giants have been up to since you stopped listening to them? I was a huge fan at one time, but lost touch with them over the years. It's time to go back. Here's a look at their 2007 album, The Else. This is a vinyl copy. Of course, I'm going to be opening this copy, checking out the packaging and what's inside and everything. Then I'm going to listen to it a few times and come back and talk about the music on it. So, The Else was the first They Might Be Giants record that was available on vinyl in 15 years, I think. I think the last one before this was Apollo 18 back in 1992. This one is cool. It doesn't have their name or the album title on the cover. It just has this sticker, The Else, They Might Be Giants, produced by the Dust Brothers, Pat Dillett, and They Might Be Giants. I have read that this is not, in fact, John Linnell and John Flansburgh. It's two models, I guess. Big, fake lies. I guess that's not them either. Anyway, this is very cool. Let's go ahead and open it. Ooh, I'm excited. Oh, here we go. I have washed my hands, so I shouldn't get fingerprints all over the jacket. Okay. And here we go, first time. If I can actually get this open. Ooh. All right, here we go. So there are lyrics. Here's all the lyrics. Yeah, it opened weird. It kind of stuck together. It didn't tear anything, but the vinyl, the cardboard is kind of warped. So what's inside? What does this look like? Here we go. If you got some They Might Be Giants vinyl, your life is going all right. All right, very simple. The Else, They Might Be Giants, side 1 and side 2. A little red label, same on both sides. No nonsense. All right, I'm going to go listen to this and see what I think of it and come back and talk about the music. All right, I've spent several days listening to and absorbing The Else. Overall, it has a dark rock feel, a kind of gritty and effusive power pop, and it's superb. So let's talk a bit about the album as a whole and then go through each of the songs. First, a little bit about the structure of The Else. It has 13 songs, although there was an entire full-length bonus disc, which I'll explain later. 8 of the 13 songs are from John Linnell and 5 are from Flansburgh, and this may be generally true, but on The Else, there are distinct approaches to the music and the lyrics of the two Johns. Linnell's lyrics tend to be in the first person, usually I or maybe we, and have a general sense of dread and dysfunction and insanity. Flansburgh's songs are often sympathetic character studies in the third person, often about she and her, and are centered more on relationships and human connections, often in troubled or frightening situations. Musically, Linnell's songs on The Else tend to be his usual stirring, hypermelodic pop, whereas Flansburgh's feature a more delicate, contemplative style, with echoey electronics and weird synthetic sounds, especially those driving the beat. That said, though, there is plenty of crossover, and each John is adept in the other's wheelhouse. So there's a uniformity of style on The Else that makes it particularly cohesive as a full album. Unlike most They Might Be Giants albums, which are produced by the two Johns and Patrick Dillett, there are outside producers on The Else. Specifically, the so-called Dust Brothers, Mike and John, most famous for producing Beck and the Beastie Boys, at least in my house. They remixed TMBG's Snail Shell as Snail Dust back in 1994, actually, but this was the first time they produced new music with the band. But they didn't produce the entire Else album, only certain songs. Here's how it breaks down. The Dust Brothers produced 5 songs on The Else by themselves. 6 songs were produced by They Might Be Giants and Patrick Dillett. The final 2 songs were produced by everyone. The Dust Brothers brought their sampling and psychedelic keyboard blurts to The Else, which does indeed make parts of the album reminiscent of Beck albums like Odelay and Guero. But as I said, there is uniformity to these songs, thanks to the idiosyncratic voices and arcane lyrics of the two Johns, and the fact that most of the album is guitar-driven, often gloriously so. Before getting into the individual songs, a bit about the subject matter and themes of The Else. First of all, I am not a TMBG lyrics interpreter. I enjoy learning the words and singing along, but trying to divine the deeper meaning of them is a fool's errand, at least when I do it. I do enjoy reading people's ideas, and tmbw.net is great for this, since every song has an interpretation tab. Generally, of course, the fan interpretations are creative and personal, but tend to devolve into obsessive conspiracy theory. Once you've decided a song is about a certain secret subject, you can make any line fit the theory. Having said that, though, The Else came out in 2007, and the two Johns have admitted that the George W. Bush administration and the Iraq War influenced parts of the album. But I would say not really that much of it. Other people see The Else as a sort of concept album about working with mainstream producers like the Dust Brothers. A kind of album-length, real-time meta-narrative about itself that, in my opinion, only makes sense from a fan perspective and not from Linnell's and Flansburgh's. But then again, back in 1990, I didn't believe my friends at first that Birdhouse in Your Soul was about a nightlight, which it obviously is. So take what I say about lyrics with a big grain of salt. This is why I tend not to interpret them my own self. The band on The Else, by the way, is the two Johns plus Dan Miller on guitar, Danny Weinkauf on bass, and Marty Beller on drums. There's also a horn section on a couple of songs. So let's talk about the songs on The Else, in order. The first is I'm Impressed, and after hearing this album a couple times, this was my favorite. It's driven by a dark, fuzzy guitar and Linnell's distorted, restrained, descending vocals. Kind of fuzzy but gentle like the creepy bears on the album cover, and we'll talk about the art and packaging of the album a little bit later, by the way. Linnell's voice is distorted, and I'm impressed because it's from the original low-res MP3 demo he emailed to Flansburgh. They found that they liked that sound but couldn't reproduce it right in the recording studio, so they just used the demo. I'm Impressed was one of the tracks produced by the Johns and Patrick Dillett without the Dust Brothers. The lyrics center on the narrator expressing his admiration of displays of strength, a gorilla pounding his chest, Godzilla's breath, a demanding generalissimo, etc. Linnell did say that the song was about strong men throughout history in general, and it seems likely that it was inspired by some figure or figures pertaining to the Iraq War. A fan debate seems to be whether the phrase I'm impressed is sarcastic, like, oh yeah, I'm impressed. It certainly seemed like it to me, even on the first listen. At any rate, that fried little buzz that pulses with the rhythm and the guitar's muffled distortions are tense and thrilling, which is why this was my favorite song on The Else. At first. Next is Take Out the Trash, a Flansburgh song. It's about a girl and the narrator's exhortations for her to get rid of a guy who is no good for her. It's like the same situation as the song Maybe I Know, a 60s song that the band covered on Long Tall Weekend, but from a different character's perspective. Take Out the Trash was produced by the whole gang. It sounds to me like a throwback to mid-60s dance rock, especially in the vocal melody and the cute sing-along phrases like, get the go-getter good and gone. In an interview, Flansburgh remarked that the song is about, quote, a girl being dogged by her lover, and the lyrics seem pretty straightforward. If you wish to see it as an allegory for America getting rid of Bush, I suppose you could. Like I'm Impressed, it features a crunchy guitar with an ominous descending melody, but here it's brighter and tougher, as is the overall thrust of the song. Down Frown is another Linnell song, falling into the first person in a dysfunctional situation category that I mentioned. Here, the narrator is trying to explain to someone why it seems like he doesn't care about what they're saying. He assures them that he's happy when they are and angry when they are, but he just isn't showing it. He's full of excuses about his apparent lack of interest or engagement, and repeatedly accepts the blame. To my ears, it drips with insincerity. There's even a part where his true smug self-interest emerges, in the lines, "You'd probably like to give me a smack, but there's something about my face that always keeps you coming back." Musically, Down Frown is cheerful and gentle, sounding a lot like mid-60s folk rock with no minor chords. Linnell sings very sweetly, which of course only makes the disingenuousness more suspicious and uncomfortable. And speaking of 60s music, at one point he tells his companion that when he's with them, the rainbow has a beard. I assume this is an intentional reference to the song SWLABR by Cream, which stands for She Walks Like a Bearded Rainbow, and famously contains the line, the rainbow has a beard. Climbing the Walls may have won out as my favorite song on The Else, at least so far. It's sort of similar to I'm Impressed, as it's a John Linnell song built around heavy electric guitar chords. But it's the soaring vocal melody, goosebump-inducing even for Linnell, mixed with the rawness of the guitar distortion that makes it so stunning and gorgeous. The chord sequences are unconventional and spiky, lurching from extreme to extreme over a laconic but super steady rhythm. The guitar notes climb upward, though, very apt for a song about climbing walls. The lyrics in the first person describe someone who quit his job and, quote, got a new job, climbing the walls. Not to interpret it too much, but it seems to me that it's about a guy going insane. His deteriorating mental state made him lose his job, so now he just stays home growing more and more demented, in a self-aware kind of way. It gets truly dark at the end when he says, the deep end. People talk a lot, but they don't really know how deep it goes. Like his sanity is finally running out for good. Climbing the Walls reminds me of the Collier brothers, Homer and Langley, two brothers who lived alone in New York's Harlem area in the early 20th century. They barred the windows of their house and hoarded tons of junk, all surrounded by booby traps. Only one, Langley, would ever go out, usually at night, to get food. They eventually died in 1947 after Langley got caught by one of his own traps and was crushed by debris. A few days later, Homer, the blind, completely housebound Collier brother, died of starvation. John Linnell named his studio Collier Brothers Studios. Cheerful, huh? Then again, another interpretation I saw about this song was that it's about a kitten or puppy who is growing bigger. Consider the line, I'm done chewing my nails, hanging my head, chasing my tail. And he wants to literally, playfully climb the walls. So who knows? Either way, oh man, that melody, what a great song. The next song is a rival for my favorite Else song, Flansburgh's Careful What You Pack. It's gentle and delicate, especially his vocals. It sounds like he's singing very close to the microphone, and his voice isn't treated much, so it has a very intimate and direct feel. The lyrics center around a neophyte young girl who is starting something new, maybe something a little daunting or scary. Like going off to college or something, that's what I thought at first. Some see Iraq War references in it, especially in the opening line, the known, the unknown, and the underknown, which closely mirror those of a certain infamous Secretary of Defense.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
Excuse me, but is this an unknown unknown?
I'm not going to say which it is.
But in fact, Careful What You Pack was commissioned and written for an animated movie called Coraline, but not used. So it ended up on the Else instead, but it's still about the main character of that movie, who is a little girl who finds a secret doorway in her house that leads to a weird fantasy world. The next song has some great lyrical goofiness in it. It's called The Captain. The Cap'n. Linnell sings it just like that, swallowing the so you can barely hear it. It's about a guy who insists that he be called the Cap'n. In other words, that he be thought of as more impressive than he really is. Despite the obvious eye-rolling of whomever he's showing off for, he fishes for compliments about his hat and defends his self-importance in lines like, people seem to think you can't be called captain unless you drive a boat. Well, I don't. Look me over, I'm the captain. Go ahead and mess with me. You'll find out what will happen. Happen, that's my favorite part. The music is typical Linnell, guitar-driven major chord pop rock, forceful and exuberant. It's a highlight of the Else and was produced by the Dust Brothers. With the Dark is one of the more compelling songs on the album. It's like a mini suite with several musically unrelated parts all connected together into a little 3-minute rock opera. Sung mostly by Flansburgh, it, maybe accidentally, recalls the Cap'n in lines like, I'm getting tired of all my nautical themes, busting my pirate hump, rocking my peg leg stump. Overall, the lyrics seem to generally describe some situation where order has broken down, but this group of people find themselves, surprisingly, in charge. Yet the destruction continues. The overall feel, though, isn't fearsome and dystopian, it's more cartoonish. That's what you get when characters are repeatedly screaming, "We're taking over!" on top of a funky disco beat. As I say, With the Dark is musically all over the place, but several parts of it have been getting randomly stuck in my head. I love this song for its audacious and ambitious musical ideas and, to me, completely obscure but tense subject matter. And that's the end of side 1 of the vinyl. Side 2 opens with another Flansburgh song, The Shadow Government, which is a more traditional guitar rock They Might Be Giants song. It sounds a lot like something from John Henry. The title phrase comes from the months following the September 11th attacks, when Dick Cheney and others were reported to be in a secret shadow government location, just in case something really catastrophic happened in Washington. The energetic, even danceable song is sung from the perspective of a guy who has a meth lab. He's driving around and being paranoid about the moon and the mayor and the, quote, bad, bad world. Eventually, the shadow government is pitted against the cowering citizens, as they're rendered in the lyric sheet. If you're looking for political commentary, it seems to be present on this fast and fun rock song. Veering into truly bizarre territory again is the next song, Be of the Bird of the Moth. It's highlighted by a loud, buzzing, descending three-note melody played on a 1960s toy keyboard called a stylophone. By the way, stylophone production was revived in 2007 after about 30 years, but that was after the Else was released. So They Might Be Giants were using a real, vintage stylophone. Nerd cred. Anyway, John Linnell sings in a relaxed voice that matches the agreeable gentleness of the music about, apparently, moths. Specifically, bee moths, which are ones that opportunistically occupy the nests of bees, and hummingbird hawk moths, which look uncannily like tiny hummingbirds when hovering next to flowers and withdrawing nectar. In Linnell's tale, everyone runs in terror from the moths. But then there are more weird developments in the lyrics, including electrical equipment in the ocean, plus other organisms, from protozoa to horses, joining the moths in their fight. Maybe the moths are airplanes or drones. If there is a lyrically opaque song on the Else that is actually about the Iraq War, or maybe war in general, I'd be willing to accept that this could be it. But I don't know. Be of the Bird of the Moth is just some unsettling weirdness to me. It sounds like Linnell was in his suburban garden, watering the plants one sunny afternoon, and then had a severe psychotic episode, and then snapped out of it and crafted a lucid song about it. A wholesome and enjoyable one, of course. The Dust Brothers only produced the next track, called Withered Hope, and it sounds like it. It's a John Linnell song enlivened by a very busy synthetic percussive rhythm. There's also a horn section. It reminds me of Mr. Excitement from the Mink Car album, if that song were fleshed out and had a sort of James Bond themed vibe to parts of it. The song is a third-person description of mostly two figures called Sad Sack and Withered Hope. They spar emotionally as Sad Sack tries to win Withered Hope, who is friendly but romantically uninterested. It gets especially weird at the end, with the sudden introduction of several more characters. Withered Hope's supposed soulmate, who obsesses over a picture of a crook. That picture, in turn, is in love with a motorbike, but the motorbike is obsessed with Sad Sack. Not so much a love triangle as a love pentagon? It's all impenetrable and emotionally fraught poetry, wide open to interpretation, which I will leave to you. Musically, Withered Hope buzzes dramatically and features a recurring sample from the 2002 live debut album of Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, a 1960s R&B revival group. Specifically, Sharon asking the crowd, "Y'all ready to get down?" By the way, Sharon Jones grew up, like me, in Augusta, Georgia, so there. Linnell's weirdness continues on Contrecoup, but this time it's not entirely his fault. Back in January 2005, he'd appeared by telephone on a New York radio show called The Next Big Thing with Aaron McKean, who is a lexicographer who tries to get artists to use obscure words in their works.
John is the John who plays the accordion in They Might Be Giants.
That's correct.
And John, the thing about you is that I imagine there isn't any word that you wouldn't work into one of your songs, right? So a weird word from Aaron is not going to seem like such a challenge, is it?
I don't know.
Okay, well, let's see how this goes. So she's going to come up with words, and then you're going to promise to use them in a song.
I see.
And the first one is Contrecoup.
Can you spell that, please?
Sure. It's Contrecoup.
Mm-hmm.
On air, she gave Linnell 3 words. Contrecoup, which is a secondary brain injury resulting from the brain bouncing to the opposite side of the cranium after an initial impact. Craniosophic, which means being educated in or focused on skulls or phrenology. And limerent, which is being obsessed with someone and feeling a need for their reciprocation. Linnell accepted the challenge, and the next week he appeared on the show again with a demo of his new song, Contrecoup.
John Linnell of They Might Be Giants.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Aaron McKean.
Yes.
John Linnell, who got 3 words from you last week, has sent us an MP3 of the words that you had him use.
I am so excited.
Don't count those chickens.
We have to hear it first.
Right. We discussed last time we spoke the ease with which you could make up a song by just randomly tossing words into it. I don't think that's necessarily credit-worthy, but...
You can do it. The question is whether you'd want to do it.
Right.
The full band version on the Else sounds pretty similar to that demo, but is more fleshed out and, of course, does indeed use the 3 words in its lyrics. It's based on 2 simple acoustic guitar chords that remind me of Putting It Down by Beck, actually, before it flowers into a more melodic and sweeping tune. It's a very, very nerdy basis for a song. Pure They Might Be Giants. In the fade-out, the music gets faster and faster, recalling the great Mrs. Train from the mid-1990s. The final Flansburgh song on the Else is Feign Amnesia, which is also the only one of his produced solely by the Dust Brothers. It's a stopping and starting fuzz rock guitar song, very poppy with a stupendous melody. It almost sounds like 80s hair metal, except with Flans's nasally vocals instead of macho posturing. According to some interpretations, the song has something to do with music itself, or the music industry, or TMBG's place in it. The lines, like a volume beyond comprehension, if the bass won't get you, the treble will get you, might be about the infamous CD loudness wars that result in noisy, distorted audio. Several 1960s garage bands are mentioned in the lyrics: The Remains, The Lost, The Barbarians, and The Seeds. Also, apparently, the 1980s new wave band The Brains, which of course ties this song neatly back to Contrecoup, which was all about brain injury. The final song on the Else has become somewhat legendary in TMBG circles. The Mesopotamians is also about music, specifically a fictional rock band made up of famous figures from the Mesopotamian culture, now Iraq and surrounding areas, of about 3,000 years ago. It's sort of a mishmash of Beatles and Monkees references, in a Flintstone-style setting of people from a much earlier era living in a kind of primitive version of the modern world. Perhaps most fun of all, the lyrics recite the band members' first names. And although it took me several listens, I can now sing along to even those lines. Sargon, Hammurabi, Ashurbanipal, and Gilgamesh. There was an animated video that underscored the Beatles, Monkees, Flintstones references, just in case you missed them. For example, here are the Mesopotamians and the Beatles from A Hard Day's Night. I guess Gilgamesh is Ringo. On an album full of singable melodies, the Mesopotamians is maybe the most fun to sing along to. Very 60s pop group theme song vibe. A side note, the Dust Brothers didn't produce this track, but they did help on the Rolling Stones' 1997 album, Bridges to Babylon. And Babylon was a major city in Mesopotamia. Conspiracy theorists, do your best. So those are the songs on the Else, except there were also a bunch of others. An early CD version contained a second bonus disc called Cast Your Pod to the Wind, made up of songs that the band had played on its podcast, plus some new unreleased stuff. My vinyl didn't come with it, unfortunately, nor a download code, so I don't have any of those songs. I hope to get it and talk about it in a future video, though. And speaking of vinyl, a couple of things. The front picture features an extra black bar on the left side that the CD doesn't have, which means the dimensions of the picture of the suit-wearing snowmen under the trees are different, so the vinyl cover has more tree branches at the top and a little more snow and lower legs at the bottom. So there. The images on the album were all taken from artist Marcel Zama, who incidentally also designed the cover of Beck's Guero, an album which also features the Dust Brothers. The snowmen on the cover of the Else are holding a suitcase which says Se aprovechan. This is Spanish for roughly they avail themselves, and is taken from a drawing done by Francisco Goya around 1811. It shows peasants robbing the dead bodies of soldiers, availing themselves of the corpse's effects, and it was a comment on the violence of war. The Else even copies Goya's penmanship pretty much exactly. Look how the S in Se has an extra ink blob in it on both. The back cover shows two creepy bear figures, also in suits, at the door of a ramshackle cabin. One is holding a cassette recorder. On the inside, a series of 4 images show life in the cabin, or something. A bear and a tree figure, a table full of masks and detritus, including the cassette recorder. My favorite, the band, made up of a tree drummer, a sort of human sock puppet bassist, and a snowman guitarist. And then a creepy, seductive bear naked on a bed. The models are not John and John, but 2 friends of the band, plus Flans's wife, Robin. That collection of crazy items makes sense when you consider how John Flansburgh described TMBG in an interview about the Else's cover art. They're, quote, a band that leans heavily on nouns. Talk about self-aware. And a closer look reveals that the jacket of my copy was indeed damaged by being stuck together, and some of the photos and text got compromised. I didn't buy this LP directly from TMBG, but from a third-party seller on Amazon.com, so I don't hold it against the band or their quality control. But I do wish there was a download code so I could get the bonus material. As for the audio quality, it's great, except between songs when there is some noise. For example, listen to the final seconds of the Mesopotamians. If I turn the volume up, you hear these weird scratching sounds. Listening to the album at normal volume, even to the MP3s I made in earbuds, I never notice it, so it's okay, but it's still annoying that it's there, and it seems to be a problem with the vinyl pressing. So this wraps up my look at The Else. Bottom line, it's great, and interesting, and fascinating, and groovy, and weird, and compelling. It has the usual tension and release as found on most They Might Be Giants albums, and the usual idiosyncratic and majestic pop rock glory. They still got it. And why did they still got it? Well, consider this. In an interview to promote the Else, the Johns were asked why They Might Be Giants still worked so well after all these years. Linnell said, "We're still scared of each other." Thanks for watching. The next video will be a vinyl unboxing and review of the Giants' next adult album, Join Us. So watch that one too. If you enjoyed this, please click like and of course hit subscribe and hit the dinner bell. See you next time, or else. Music itself, or the music industry, or They Might Be Giants' place in it. Giants' That's not a thing. It has the usual tension and release as found on most They Might Be Giants albums. What's the band called? The Might Be Giants?